right. Woo! Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Oh yeah, here we go. Good afternoon. Instagram, you got like a lot of space above my head there. Yeah, well, you're welcome. You're welcome for all that space above my head. And then I'm just going to make sure that I've got everything going here on Facebook as well. Yeah, look at that. Looks good. Looks good, looks good. Hey friends. Welcome to 2022. This is my first live office hours in 2022. Yeah. Yeah, they are. Oh, hey, there you go. My first live office hours in 2022. What do you know, eh? What do you know? I totally gaffed that this was the first live office hours. First live office hours of 2022. All right. Well, welcome, welcome, welcome. Hey, welcome. My name is Dr. Shannon Coates. And my pronouns are she, they. And I am coming to you live from north of Toronto, here in Canada. Here in nice snowy Canada. I don't know if you can see out my window there, but there's some snow out there. Not all of Canada is snowy right now, just FYI. We're a really big country, so just FYI. But lots of us have snow. And we are one of the places that has snow. And it's a little chilly out there today. Not like super, super chilly, not like, not like Northern Ontario or, Alberta chilly, but it is chilly out there. It's definitely in the, I think it's like negative 15 or something Celsius here today. So that's pretty cool. That's pretty chilly. That'll get the snow crunching as you're walking. Crunch, 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 crunch. Yeah, that's crunchy sound when you walk, which is beautiful. All right, so I am here on the traditional lands of the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, the Mississauga and the Wendat Neo-Lencio peoples here in Ontario, Canada. And I am doing a little bit, Facebook is telling me something about the frame being too slow or something. I don't know. Too low FPS. The current frame rate is too low. Please set the frame rate to 15 to 16 FPS. What does that mean? And where? Where the heck am I supposed to set the frame rate? Facebook, why aren't you just doing that automatically for me? Just do that. Just do it automatically. Okay, well, I think it went up automatically. I don't know. Hopefully Facebook, hopefully it's not too crazy for you to watch. I hope. Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed it's not too crazy. So, whoops, sorry about that, Instagram. I just kicked my iPad, so now you're like, whoa. Hey, so here we go. Let's talk a little bit about how we want to go into 2022. And I know January, the turn of the year is just arbitrary. It is really, it's what you make it, right? So it's just an arbitrary date. And if you want to make it something big, you go ahead. And if you don't want to, that's fine too. I'm saying it's not a bad time to kind of have a little bit of a reconsider of some things, and also to set some intentions if you want to, whatever, up to you. Here's something that I do want to go into 2022, sort of talking about though too. Sorry, let me just grab my notes here. And I posted about this on Monday, and I kind of just wanted to go into 2022 sort of values forward, right? Just core values forward, and talking about all of those things, having them right at the front of what I do and how I train and how we work. So one of the things that, if you have followed me at all, you will know that I talk about quite a bit is moral values and moral judgments in the voice studio. And what I mean by that, I mean that if and when we have the desire, the temptation, the subconscious thought that we're working with someone who is either bad or good. So if we're using that kind of language to describe, or that kind of idea, if that's in our minds, to describe someone who we're working with, a student who we're working with. I really want us to examine that and to really come back to, and to really reframe and do some work to examine where that's coming from, and to do some reframing. So the reason that I think this is really important is that no matter whether we think a student is, and I'm going to talk a little bit today in the live office hours, I'm going to talk a little bit about how that can manifest in the studio. So how a couple of ways that we might be talking to a student or thinking about a student as good or bad. A couple of ways that we might be doing that, conscious or subconscious, right? So I want to talk about that a little bit later. But before that, I want to just kind of put this into a framework of why this can be so damaging, because I said a little bit about that in the post on Monday, that this can be very damaging to the students who we're working with and to people in general when we think about them in terms of moral terms, in terms of good or bad. And and this can be damaging both to the people who we think are bad, whether we think they're, again, we're going to get into that in a minute, or to the people who we think are good. This can be damaging on all the levels, right? It's not just whether we think of somebody as a bad student that is the thing that we want to change. We also want to change how we think about people if we're thinking about them as a good student or a good singer or a talented singer, right? We want to examine that as well. So the reason that this is important is that we are not seeing people as a whole. So we're not, when we are judging as on that sort of scale of good or bad, no matter what aspect we're judging, again, we'll talk about that in a minute, but we're not seeing people as a whole. And whether we actually externalize this and say to them, oh, you're a good singer or you're a bad singer, or this student is a bad student because they do X, Y, Z, or this student is a good student because they do X, Y, Z, whether we externalize that and say it out loud, or whether we just think it, it affects the student no matter what, because our thought, our brains, the way we are thinking about someone affects the way we treat them, what we expect from them, how we speak to them, the way we greet them. All of the things around our interaction with that person will be colored by what we think about that person. And if we're thinking in terms of good or bad, that will color and that will read. I promise you, it will read. The student will know, whether they know externally or internally, they will know. And especially when we're working with young singers and young people who don't have necessarily the self-possession to be able to say, hey, this is your issue, like you're thinking this and this is your issue, this isn't me, that's the problem here. Unless we are sort of self-possessed enough to do that, we take it on as something that we've done. So again, both in good and bad. So a student, especially a young student, who is being treated as if they are bad, or as if they are a bad singer, or as if they have a bad voice, we will take that on young students will take that on as a deficiency within themselves, as something that is wrong with them, right? And same thing on the other side. If I am being treated as if I am a good student, as if I am a good singer, as if I have a good voice, I will take that on as well as a young singer without thinking about, and I will take on all of the judgments that come with that, and then I will translate that over into other people too. So both sides of that coin are not helpful and are damaging to students, and especially, like I said, to young singers who don't necessarily have the wherewithal to be able to say, this actually isn't me. that is, that is the issue here. This is actually you, the teacher. That's the issue here. This is the adult in my life. That is the issue here, right? So we want to, so we also then, and we assume then as young singers that we deserve to be treated, spoken to, etc., in the way that we are being treated or spoken to. We assume that we deserve it, whether we're being treated because we're good, one way because we're good, or whether we're being treated another way because we're bad. So we assume that we deserve that. So we assume if we're being treated one way because we're good, we assume that we are that there is this like and don't get me wrong, I do believe that we have inherent goodness, so don't get me wrong, but we assume that we have this like I can do there's nothing that I have to work on, right? We assume that there's nothing that we have to do, and there's nothing that I need to change or work on. And I mean this in the positive sense, not in the like I do believe that we are inherently good, so don't get me wrong there. And then by the other token, we assume that we have so much that we need to work on that is so bad, but we assume that we can't do anything about it, right? It takes our agency away on both sides of the coin. It takes our agency away in terms of who we are as people. Okay, so that's why, and that affects us forever, right? It affects us as people, and it affects our singing. It affects us as singers, and who we are as performers, and how we enjoy singing and how we learn. It affects all of that stuff as students. So that's the importance of this. That's the importance of figuring this out for ourselves. And so there are two main ways, I think, that this comes out in the voice studio as teachers. That how moral judgments kind of ramble over into the voice studio. So one way is that we perceive students as either a good student or a bad student, and we base that on our perception of how the student, or our ideas of how that student should be doing things in the lessons, right? And our perception of how someone should be doing something is based on all of the things in our lives and all of the things that we have taken on and all the ways we were treated, right? It's based on all of those things, and also our position in society and our level of privilege in society and, how we were raised. I mean, it's based on all of those things, as well as then how we perceive the person in front of us. So our expectations about how a student should behave, or how a student should follow the rules or should learn, that's all based on stuff that we can and should examine, especially. So some specific examples of that are, do we think that students are lazy? And then if we do, what rule do we perceive them to be breaking in order so that we are perceiving them as lazy? What's the rule that we are perceiving them to have broken, right? What's that unspoken thing that we are perceiving them to be broken? Perhaps they don't practice every day, which, if that is the rule that they're breaking, you need to examine that for yourself, whether that is a good rule or not, and then examine whether or not that is something that you actually do want to have in your studio, that they should be practicing a certain amount of time and in a specific way. And then if that is something that you want in your studio and you want your students to have, then we start to, let me get to that in a minute, actually. And then another rule or another thing that they might be doing, or another rule they might be breaking in order for you to perceive them as being lazy, is perhaps they don't always come to their lesson on time. Perhaps they don't always prepare in the way that you would like them to. What are the rules that they are breaking when we think this is a lazy student? What are the rules that they're breaking when we think this is a student who doesn't pay attention? They're flighty, they're not focused, they don't want this badly enough. They're unmotivated. What are the rules that we think they're breaking when that is the thing that we think about them? So some of the rules, these are big quotes around this, some of the rules that we might think they're breaking might be around, oh hi, might be around, say, I've just posted about this today actually, maybe when they come into their lesson, they don't, or maybe when you're talking about something or if they're in the lesson, maybe they don't sit still, maybe they don't stand still, maybe they don't stand. I've worked with lots of singers who don't stand, who don't want to stand. They don't like standing. It's uncomfortable. Maybe they don't. So what is the rule that they're breaking? The rule that you've got in your mind around how they should be behaving that is causing you to think that they are not focused, that they are flighty, that they don't want this badly enough, that they're disrespecting you and your time. Ooh, what are the rules they're breaking that you have put into place? What are those things that you're thinking that make you think that they are disrespecting you or that they are not paying attention? So they might not be like laser focused on everything you say in the way that you want them to be. They might not be, this came up in a forum earlier, they might not be writing in their scores the way you want them to be. So they might not be taking notes with their pencil in their score. Oh, dude, what is the rule that they're breaking that you think they don't want this badly enough? They're not listening to me. They're disrespecting my time and expertise. What's the rule they're breaking that makes you think that about them? Yeah, the writing stuff in the score. There's a lot in that. There's a lot. And getting frustrated with your student because they're not writing in the score. I've got some thoughts. I've got some thoughts on that. But anyway, what are some rules that they might be breaking if you think that they are, what was some other ones there? What are some rules that they might be breaking? Some of your rules that they might be breaking if you think that they are, maybe the parents aren't paying on time. Maybe the parents are disrespecting you in that way. Maybe the parents are not, and don't get me wrong, these are all, I'm not saying that these aren't necessarily valid rules. There are some reasons we have these rules in place, but we want to consider these rules, especially when we start to have thoughts about the students and or their parents that are along the lines of like, this is a lazy, entitled student. What are the rules they're following on the other side when we think, ooh, this is a student who's paying attention all the time. This is a good student. This is a student who has behavior, who was raised well. This is a student whose parents knew what they were doing. This is a student who is so respectful. This is a student who I never have any issues with in the studio in terms of disrespect. What are the rules that they're following? And are those rules arbitrary, or are those rules perhaps actually detrimental to the person? So one of an example of where a rule follower who seems like they're good because they're not disrespecting you in the studio and they're doing everything you tell them to in the studio. An example of how that can be detrimental is I'm trying to decide whether I want to use a specific person or keep it general. I think I'm going to keep it general. So, for example, a student who is in your lesson, who you are working with, who let's say never questions, let's say that, who always sings the repertoire that you give to them, and who always comes absolutely prepared for every single lesson. I mean, that's a good student, right? That's a student who is, sorry, people messaging me while I'm live. It's fine, but maybe stop. Kidding. I'm totally kidding. It's all good. But that's an example of a student who is a good student, right? They're well prepared. They're behaved. They, they obviously want this. They're motivated. They respect me. They're going to get the most out for their money. Or there's someone who is so terrified to make a mistake that their anxiety and fear is driving them. I know a few people that this is why they are a good student and why you like them as a student, because they're driven by their anxiety and fear. And that is what is making them a good student according to your rules. And that's not healthy for them. Maybe easier for you as a teacher, but wow, is it ever not healthy for them? Or for us as people? Okay. So when you have something that's going on in your head, I'm just encouraging you to consider when I'm tempted to think of a student in terms of good or bad, examine the rules that they are following or breaking. What are those rules that I have set up that they are following or breaking that makes me think of them as a good or bad student? And then the next step on that one is to consider, what are the ways that I can make these rules? What happens if I talk to the student about what their goals are and what they want to accomplish, where they want to go, and what works best for them? Something that I am increasingly an advocate of is the idea of putting, I've always been, but increasingly an advocate of, and that I wish that I had done years and years and years ago, but I did not. But anyway, here we go. We learn and we do as we go, right? So, is talking to students when I perceive that someone is not a good student, and so I perceive that they are not practicing regularly. Okay, so they're not practicing regularly. And then I say, okay, so they're breaking that rule. So they are breaking that rule about practicing regularly. And then I talk to the student and I say something like, hey, what are your goals here? What works for you? How do you want to practice regularly? Or is that just something that I want for you? If that's something that I want for you, but you're still accomplishing your goals without doing it, do you really need to do it? Can we change the definition of practice? Can we change how practicing works for you? Can we make practicing something that is, can we examine what practicing requires? So does practicing require that I sit at the piano at a specific time every single day and that I plunk out notes and that I do exercises? For some people it might. For lots of people, it does not. It does not. For lots of people, walking past the piano and thinking, ooh, yeah, I want to play some music right now, is the way that practicing works. Or listening and singing along to something. That's the way that practicing works for them. So discovering that with the student and taking the expectation of the rule off of them, that's going to transform the way that you look at the student and also the way that you implement those rules, right? And examine how those rules work. The second way that we look at good and bad in the students we work with, or the way that we consider students good or bad, is in their singing voice. So we've moved from sort of behavior and like who they are as a person in the studio and whether they're following sort of like studio rules to whether what's happening in their singing voice, right? Are they a good singer or a bad singer? Do they have a good voice or a bad voice? And again, this can affect singers in both ways, right? If we talk about singers or think about singers as having a good voice, We can so easily get out of a growth mentality mindset, right? On both sides, we get out of growth mentality mindset, because if we think of them as being bad, that singer then is like, well, there's nothing I can do. I'm just a bad singer. Or there's nothing I can do. I'm a good singer. It's this like God-given talent and I don't have to do anything for it, right? Like I don't have to, like there's no, I'm stuck where I am. So then I don't have any resiliency when I come across when I actually do get a problem, when I encounter a problem, because oops, I'm not good enough to get past that problem. And so now because I'm good, and so I don't have room to grow, right? So it affects singers on both sides of this coin, whether they think of themselves and whether you think of themselves as a good singer or a bad singer, or as someone who has a good voice or someone who has a bad voice. So if that is, first of all, if you're thinking of singers in those terms and of singers' voices in those terms, can I encourage you to really consider this next point. What is the thing about the singing that is making you think that it's bad singing? Are they not singing in tune? If they're not singing in tune, that's not bad singing. That's uncoordinated singing. And if something's uncoordinated, guess what? It can be made coordinated. We can find the coordination. And if you're the kind of teacher or the kind of person who finds it frustrating to work with uncoordinated singers, that's perfectly legitimate. You are allowed to say, this saps my energy and I don't enjoy working with singers to get them to that coordination level. I don't enjoy that. Perfectly fine. You're allowed to say that and recognize that, because there are like so many teachers out there who love working with uncoordinated singers to get them coordinated, and who absolutely love that process, because it's a long process, it's a hard process, but it's a very rewarding process. So for lots of singers, right? So terrific. That's fine. Recognize it. But please, for the love, please do not say that you don't like working with bad singers or singers with bad voices. It's not, they don't have a bad voice. They have a technical deficiency at some level that you don't know how to or don't like working with, and that's perfectly acceptable. Same thing on the other side. If you have singers where you're only willing to work with good singers, or you tell the singer that they're a good singer or they're a talented singer or whatever. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that we should not be encouraging singers. Do not get me wrong here. But if you're giving people the like, you're good or you're talented, you take away their agency. So then they become unable to overcome and grow, right? Because I'm good. I'm just good. And if you decide that you only want to work with good singers, that's fine, but you need to figure out what good means. And then you need to take the moral value out of it, right? You need to take that moral judgment out of it. Name it. So what is it that you love working with? Do you love working with singers who already have something to say? Do you love working with singers who already, who already know themselves and are all ready to communicate, and who are looking for ways to just line a few things up in order to communicate more effectively? You like working with like advanced artists. That's fine. Say that. It's not that you like working with good singers. It's that you like working with artists who already know, and singers who already know what they want to say and how they want to say it. And that's fine. If you don't like working with singers who already know what they want to say and how they want to say it, that's fine too. You're allowed to say, I love developing and working with a singer to find their why and to figure out what they want to say and what they want to communicate and how they want to do it. That's what I love. I love working with developing singers, right? Say it. Say the thing. Say the thing. Don't say the good or bad. If you're tempted to say good or bad, if you're tempted to say to have that judgment on a singer's voice or on a singer's sort of talent, if you will, on their level of coordination and their level of development. If you're tempted to have that judgment, I'm begging you to figure that out in 2022. Figure that out. If you find yourself rating students in your studio on a good or bad level, figure that shit out, please. Please. Not just for the student, because yes, for the student, but also for your own clarity in your own mind. This will help you to be a better teacher. I promise you, on all the things that I can swear on and pinky swear, this will help you to be a better teacher if we are examining how we are describing students in our mind, even if it's just internally. If we are examining how we're describing students and examining what the rules are, if we're describing behavior as good or bad, examining what those rules are that they are either breaking or following. And then on the flip side, in terms of if we're describing singers' voices as good or bad, what is it specifically about the voice? What is it specifically? Can I tell you something? You will not work well. A singer who you think is a bad singer, a student who you think is a bad student, will not progress in your studio. You will not work well with them. They will not work well with you. It will not work. It will not work. And it will drain your energy, and they will take on a whole bunch of stuff that is not good for them either. It will not work. If you are working with it, so you need to examine some things, and you're allowed to refer on. You're allowed to say, hey, this student, I'm not able to find the right way to work with this student so that I'm not thinking about them as a bad student. I'm not able to figure that out right now. Fair. Refer that student to someone who will be able to work with them. Yes, there's lots of students for all, and there's so many great teachers. So refer them on. That's something that makes you a great teacher. And if you are working with students who you think are good students, examine why. Examine why, and then figure out how to not just think of them as good students, or not just think of them as a good singer. If you are just thinking of them as a good singer, there's nothing else they have to learn. That's not a good way to be as a student. That's not a good way for you to think about. Listen to me with the moral judgment there. That's not a way for them to be able to learn into the future, right? And as soon as that student hits that wall, whatever it is, they're not going to be able to overcome, because they think of themselves, they're stuck in their fixed mindset around being a good student. It's not good. There we go. I just said it's not good again. Good and bad. So consider. Think about the things that are underlying or underpinning your perception of students, especially when we're thinking about whether or not they are a good or a bad student, or whether or not they have a good or a bad voice, right? Whether they're a good or a bad singer, right? Think about those. Think about that, when those thoughts come up, and consider, just think about it. And see what you can come up with in terms of maybe changing some rules, or maybe finding other ways to implement the rules if you think those rules are super important, and finding better ways to describe singers' voices and to describe singers. More accurate ways. All right. There we go. That was the first live office hours of 2022. So stay tuned. If you are not subscribed to my mailing list, get on there, find it somewhere. It's on my website. You can get on my website and subscribe there. But because season announcement coming soon, or a season, what's it called? A season. what's it called? A season announcement. You know how Western classical singers, like all the opera singers, they're like, here's a season announcement, like all the gigs that I'm doing in 2022 or whatever, right? Or in the next season. You're so welcome. You're so welcome. You know how they do that? Well, my marketing social media person also does some social media for one of the artist management's company here in Canada. And so she was like, we should do a season announcement. And I'm like, yes, we should. So we're going to do that. So stay tuned because there's lots of really fun stuff coming in 2022. I can tell you February is Child and Adolescent Voice Month. I'm going to do both a pop-up and a practicum, 2-week practicum. So February is that. I've got some really exciting stuff for the March break here in Canada. So somewhere in your world it may not be March break, but I'm still going to do it over March break. So I'm going to do a March break intensive here in Canada for voice teachers. Not here in Canada, it's going to be the Canadian March break for voice teachers, an intensive for voice teachers in that time frame. Lots of exciting stuff coming up. So stay tuned, as they say, and take good care. Have a great weekend. Woo! Ending.